case you didn't know it, this country has been at war. I think we can look back and say since September 11th, 15 years ago. But if you go all the way back to those early hijackings in the 1970s, early 1970s, by Palestinian Liberation Organization and a lot of these other terrorist organizations, we've been at war, really, realistically, for most of my adult life. Because when I was born, we were already involved in a brush fire that grew in Southeast Asia. The thing is that these things go on and on and on, and yet you've got people, I think, in Washington who are simply in denial because they don't want to admit that on their watch they were unable to bring all of this to an end. Therefore, we hear some terrorist groups are known as the JV Squad. And we have news conferences where we're told the world is safer now than it has been in a very long time. And I suppose when it comes to certain crime statistics in the United States, that's true. But we told you yesterday there's been a big spike in homicides in just about all of our major cities over the last 18 months. That looks like it's going to continue. There's a lot less respect for the law than there used to be. And we're constantly dealing with the threat from Islamic terrorism. Now, bring this up because if you've seen the headlines on Drudge, so much coverage right now being devoted to the Democrat National Convention that likely this story will not get the treatment it needs. But I was just looking at this. It's been headlining Drudge at least for the last half hour, 40 minutes. Uh, a priest in Normandy had his throat cut during morning mass today while another hostage is fighting for life after knife men burst into Normandy Church at 9 a.m. So I guess France will have to discuss knife control. Reports that one of the attackers shouted Allahu Akbar as they launched attack at the church near Rouen. The Vatican has condemned the barbaric killing of the 84-year-old priest, and an anti-terror investigation is underway. 84 years old. You know, these Islamic terrorists threw a man by the name of Leon Klinghoffer off a boat in the Mediterranean Sea back in the middle of the 1980s. Mr. Klinghoffer was disabled and in a wheelchair. His only crime was being a Jewish American. This is a savage, savage group of people that we are dealing with, and nothing has changed. ISIS is claiming responsibility, of course. The other day, after one of these attacks in Germany, I heard, ISIS isn't responsible. ISIS is responsible if it's gone online and told these guys, go out and kill people. And they do it because they want to impress ISIS, even though they may not necessarily be getting a paycheck from ISIS or be fighting on a battlefield with ISIS. The battlefield now is worldwide. There's one of the wounded people here was a nun, old woman who was savagely attacked as well. So what we're dealing with is all of this going on in various parts of the world. But yeah, killing 84-year-old men, that makes you a man yourself, I guess, huh? 10 minutes now after 9 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News. Just because most of these Muslim men are impotent in the first place, they blame all their problems with women and the fact that, no one likes them and they get shunned. So they blame all their problems on everybody else, including Christians and Westerners. It's time that we go in and give these people the punch in the nose that they deserve. Tim Kaine, by the way, promises bill to legalize illegal immigrants in first 100 days. Headline from the Washington Times. Steve Millington was saying it's not just, by the way, illegal immigrants from south of our border. It's all immigrants. That would mean refugees as well. How about this? From CNSnews.com, 6,726 Syrian refugees admitted to the United States so far this year, but only 23 of those 6,726 are Christians. Would you like to guess the faith of the rest of them? Yeah. And then this, Holman W. Jenkins. It's Brett Stevens, excuse me. They're both columnists with the Wall Street Journal, and sometimes I get them confused when I see their photograph on the paper I printed out. Somewhat of a similar look. Brett Stevens, writing at the Wall Street Journal, was France helpless, he writes, in May 1940. He says, let's stipulate that a van barreling down a seaside promenade is not a panzer division, but as France in 1940, Europe today displays the same combination of doctrinal rigidity, there we go, and loss of will that allowed an Allied army of 144 divisions to be routed by Germany in 6 weeks. The Maginot Line of European values won't prevail over people who recognize none of those values. And he writes, it seems almost like a past epic that Germans welcomed a million Middle Eastern migrants in an ecstasy of moral self-congratulation. just like you have people in this county who pat themselves on the back because, oh, we're better than that. Oh, we must bring them here, and then I can have somebody clean my toilets for next to nothing. Or how about the argument that one trustee made at the College of Southern Idaho? Well, we got a lot of better restaurants because of this. Yeah, a lot more choices. So we risk our security so some guy over at CSI can go out and have a falafel. Is that it? Maybe a little bit more baklava? Now Germany will have to confront the writers as a terror threat that will make the Baader-Meinhof gang of the 1970s seem trivial. Can the decline be stopped? Yes, but that would require a great unlearning of the political mythologies on which modern Europe was built. Among those mythologies, that the European Union is the result of a post-war moral commitment to peace, that Christianity is of merely historical importance to European identity, that there's no such thing as a military solution, that one's country isn't worth fighting for, that honor is atavistic and tolerance is the supreme value. People who believe in nothing, he writes, including themselves, will ultimately submit to anything. And we've got them here. These are people who are traitors to their culture, to their faith, you name it. They are basically selling us down the river. The only difference right now between our small towns and cities in America and what's going on in Europe is there just aren't as many yet. That is the difference. And I keep arguing this on the air. We are inviting disaster by allowing these elites on the local level and at our federal government level to just nod their heads in acceptance of all of this. 736-0300. Bill Colley with you on Top Story today on News Radio 1310, KLIX at newsradio1310.com. And some of these people just think that the gates should be open, that there shouldn't be any borders, and that we could all just sit down, and if we all would just have a song. Kumbaya, Lord, kumbaya. It is absolutely sickening. Let's go to the telephones. You're up next. You're on the air on KLIX.
Oh, no, Bill, playing that song. I almost wrecked my car. I hate that. That crap. Anyway, that's as explicit as I'll get. One of the catchphrases of Obama is every time something happens or we try to push back against this or stem this tide, he comes out and says, well, that's not who we are. It's like, okay, Mr. Obama, then who are we? And, the thing is Mr. Obama is one of these people who want us to bend over and say, thank you, sir, may I have another?
Well.
And, the thing is those elites in Twin, they need to realize that it's not just Twin Falls this affects. You have other rural communities around the area that this affects. So this is a big problem. And I understand that the Idaho Attorney General for the U.S. is trying to squash this thing that happened there with the 5-year-old. And by threatening to jail people. And it's like, okay, so you're going to threaten us?
She backed down, though.
She did?
She did.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wonder what her got to do that.
Media coverage, and I guess it embarrassed her to the point where she realized she looked more like what you call Robespierre in France, ready to behead anyone who disagreed with her.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty much what the DNC is doing to itself lately, and
yeah,
I just want to watch the carnage, and
well,
because Cleveland was quiet compared to this crap.
Thank you for the call, sir. It certainly was. Yet that's the media saying, "Oh, that convention was unruly." Where? You're next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on KLIX. It's 916.
Bill, good morning.
Yes.
I just wanted to add a little tidbit. You went back to the 40s, and I'm going back to the about 58, 59, roughly in that area. France was having a big problem with the Algerians, and it got really heated, and de Gaulle decided, well, we can take care of this problem. No problem at all. We'll just throw the Americans out. I know for a fact that personally that there were Americans there that had established areas that were trying to help keep things under control there. And he said, "Oh, we'll just toss the Americans out. We'll take care of it."
He
Now you
even
see,
he
yeah,
even tried to bring Algeria into a greater France. He was going to just bring them all in, give
right.
them all the vote, and that would have destroyed what was known as French culture.
Oh yeah, it was just that simple. And now down the road, all these years later, they haven't learned anything, and we haven't learned anything by example. But too many American people have their head in the sand, or in their computers, or their iPhones, or something. I can't believe how inconsistent the thought process is here in America.
Well, the French to a man and woman are almost wholly like American liberals, noses in the air, no better than everyone else, and yet just are completely inept.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I'm hoping and praying American people start shaping up, because this is the year we either go to a socialist horrible place in this country, or we retain our American freedom. And you were right about the American flags when you were discussing that earlier. I haven't seen any American flags this week yet. But there's no doubt in my mind that Trump had all the states represented on his background when he gave his acceptance speech. So you keep talking. You're doing good.
Hey, thank you much for the call. This situation, you've got a Europe that just doesn't know how to respond because they haven't had any courageous people running these countries. That their cultures have been, the French culture has been really destroyed for a couple of 100 years. They just, there was the old joke, when Germany reunified, the France immediately surrendered. But the Germans, despite their nasty reputation of the first half of the last century, I mean, they have become, I hate to say this, a culture of cowards. And you're seeing it across Europe. It's because the liberals and the socialists got control of those countries after World War II. And this is what 70 years of that has wrought. The complete and utter I said the other day, this cancer is now so deep, or if you want to use the analogy of tentacles, it's now so deep within the body of Europe, they can't remove it. How do you move millions of Muslims living in Greater London, millions of Muslims living in Greater Paris? You can't simply tell them you got to go, because look what they're doing already. What if you actually challenge them? What do you expect they'll do in return? And again, we aren't those kind of people. Yeah, well, the dead talk a lot, don't they, just before they die? 920, because that's what you're all bringing upon us. 920, Bill Colley with you on Top Story. I'm told Barney Frank is going to be joining us in a moment from the Democrat National Convention, giving us an update.